Welcome back to the third episode now of what guns should insert your Metal Gear character here use. Today we're going to be talking about Metal Gear Solid 2, but probably more specifically we're going to be talking about Raiden. I feel Raiden is more appropriate since he takes on most of the things that Snake will have to take on in the tanker mission, but then there's so much more going on. So if we're looking at Metal Gear Solid 2 like a complete mission, we kind of have to look at the plant chapter. So with that in mind, let's get right to the point and talk about the conditions that Raiden, or you if you're going to be taking his place, are going to have to face. The first big one is going to be water. The big shell is a very wet environment. There's going to be flooded areas. You start the infiltration off by swimming. It's surrounded by water, so if you survive a fall off one of the decks, then guess what? You're going to be pretty wet. So yeah, whatever guns we end up bringing in here have to be able to not choke up when introduced to being submerged. Open urban environments. Now one might think, oh yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2, that's pretty much all hallways. All we need are close range weapons. However, there are a lot of sections in which you face large outdoor environments. You have stairways, you have hallways, you have buildings, you have scaffoldings, you have construction equipment. You're going to have to deal with all the trappings of an urban environment in the sense that you're not always going to be able to see directly across this distance. So that is something to keep in mind. On that note though, you are going to have to deal with tight hallways. Now of course when you're outdoors you have those sprawling urban areas with a lot of distance, but when you're inside, the majority of confrontations you will be facing are going to be less than 10 meters. That's a scary thought, and we definitely need to think of some close range options to help keep us alive in those tight-knit, claustrophobic hallways. In regards to ammo types we're going to need to bring with us, we need to keep in mind that we're going to have situations that deal with hostages, even escorting said hostages, and we're going to have to deal with armored opponents. So we're going to have to strive for a little bit of balance between penetration and keeping in mind that over-penetration might become an issue in certain areas. But let's stop thinking purely about the negatives we'll have to deal with, because one of the biggest pluses about the plant chapter is that you're going to have Solid Snake himself there to help you. This means we don't have to worry too much about carrying too much because we can share the load with Snake, in a similar way that Venom Snake could share some of his load in his loadout with Quiet. We also have to keep in mind that unlike Shadow Moses, there are a variety of ammo types available here on the big shell, from 5.56, 5.45, to 9mm, to 9x18mm, to 45 ACP, to 308, you're going to be finding a lot of different ammunition on the base. And the last big plus about the plant chapter is that we're going to come across a lot of enemy uniforms. This is going to influence our loadout big time, as it changes the entire dynamic around the stealth. So with that being said, let's talk about the guns we're actually going to be bringing in here. Okay, now that we know the conditions, we know what's going to be going on within the plant chapter, what we're going to be going up against, let's talk about the actual guns I think would give you the best chance. And we're going to change things up a little bit, as the first gun we're going to be talking about is your sidearm or pistol. I think in this situation, the best handgun you could bring in with you is the FN57 pistol. And the biggest contributor to why you should bring this is the ammo availability. Normally 5.7 by 28mm is going to be incredibly difficult to find. However, on the big shell, many of the guards, specifically the Tengu, are going to be equipped with it. Now, it might be harder to find than other ammunitions, but we're assuming you're bringing in your own supply, and if shit really hits the fan, you can find this ammo if you get closer to arsenal gear, or maybe in the Strut F warehouse if you look hard enough. So yeah, since ammo availability is in our favor, the FN57 pistol definitely shows up here as a really good option, but there's more to it than that. The fact that it's armor piercing means that when you have to draw your sidearm, it doesn't matter if you're going up against the basic Grlukovich guard, the armored assaulters, or some of the higher tier enemies like the Tengu at the end of the game. You'll have a pistol that can make it through their armor. One of the most underrated aspects of sidearms is ammunition capacity, and the FN57, if you bring in the proprietary extended magazines, gives you 30 rounds. Now, if you actually have to draw this and use it in a firefight, let me tell you something. You're not going to stop like in the game where you just lock your arms together and start firing away at your enemy. You're going to be emptying out, like just dumping that magazine towards your enemies and scrambling for cover. You're not going to stand in the open while bullets are whizzing at you. So having 30 rounds of armor penetrating ammunition is definitely going to be a big advantage on your side. And then last but not least, the FN57 is going to be a good choice because it's striker fired, and that is a more reliable design than something that would be double action. Now at this point, whether or not you like the FN57, you might be thinking, Pliskin, why wouldn't you bring in a suppressed 9mm pistol? I mean, you want to be stealthy on this mission, right? And you're not going to be stealthy even if you have a 9mm pistol with subsonic ammunition and a suppressor. A suppressed 9mm comes out to about 125 decibels. Average. That's a general average there. You might get like 119, you might get 127, but generally when you fire this thing, it's going to be around 125 decibels. That is the equivalent of a firecracker going off, which might not permanently damage your hearing, but you're not going to go around the base like you do in game, stopping and popping guys in the head. There might be situations where you're outdoors, if there's a Harrier jet flying around or something really loud happening, a firefight being engaged, where you might be able to shoot a guy and have the others not hear you, but you're not going to get that kind of Metal Gear trank pistol kind of stealth, if that's what you're thinking. I'd rather go with a pistol that's really apt for defense and combat, and in that way, the 5.7 pistol and the configuration I just talked about is probably the best way to go along with it. Maybe for the darker environments, throw a flashlight on there, and maybe throw a suppressor on it for your own comfort. But I cannot stress this enough, you're not going to get a stealthy pistol here that has a round that has enough punch or penetration to deal with the armored opponents you're going to be going up against. Next up, I would have to go with the Benelli M4. Now, this thing will clear hallways and beat down armored opponents at close ranges. Hell, if you use slugs, you can cover even some of the longer range outdoors. This is something that if you have a group of guys coming in with a shield and, some basic ballistic armor on their chest, if you pump out 9 rounds of 12 gauge at them, they're still going to go down. Even if their armor stops it, the 12 gauge will hit them hard enough to knock them to the ground, and a second or third round hitting them is definitely going to take them out of the fight. This is a weapon where the spread becomes super reliable in the hallways. If you're concerned in certain hostage situations, you can switch over to slugs fairly easily and fairly quickly. If you train on this platform, it allows for that, and it's just a very robust and reliable system that's not going to choke up on the water, is going to do you amazingly in close quarters, and if you really need it to, you can have it stretch out again with those slugs. Now at this point you might be thinking, Pliskin, shotguns are great and all, and we know you you love them, but why wouldn't you go with a suppressed SBR or an SMG? And here's the thing, they just aren't quiet enough for what you're imagining. So for example, the SIG MCX Rattler in 300 Blackout is about 119 decibels. A suppressed MPX, which is the 9mm version of this, is still going to be around the same amount of noise. So you're not really getting that stealthy gun that you're imagining. And you might be like, but with a rifle or PDW round, I get more ammo, I have a higher fire rate if I want to lock it into full auto, I can make it a lot more compact, and yes, you can. However, I'm going with the Benelli M4 just because in those high octane situations, when you have that many guys coming at you in an enclosed space, it's going to be incredibly difficult to make your shots count, to make shot placement count, which is why I want to go with the spread of a shotgun, specifically a semi-automatic shotgun. Hell, if you want to go even crazier, you can bring in some phosphorus buck, so you can light these fuckers on fire when they're coming at you, versus if you had something like the MCX Rattler, yeah, you could full auto it, and it'll take care of a couple of the guys there, but because it's a subsonic round, you don't have that penetration, so you might like spend 10 or 20 rounds in a single guy, because again, it's going to be high octane, you're just going to be thinking about coming out alive. So you'll empty that shit out, and I mean, it'll work, but I feel more comfortable giving you and giving Raiden a better chance of coming back alive with a Benelli M4 shotgun. And before you start saying, oh yeah, but Pliskin, there's so many AKs and ARs on the base there, so there's so much ammo for those platforms, your shotgun, you're going to run out of ammo super fast. And no, the assault teams use the Spaz 12 and they're firing 12 gauge at you. So imagine the oomph and power that their Spaz 12 has, and imagine that in a rapid fire configuration. That's the power I want to give to you. Ultimately, when people are thinking about these SBRs or SMGs, they're thinking about suppressing them, and it's just not going to be quiet enough. So I guess the biggest push towards the Benelli M4 is the idea that if you can't go quiet, you might as well feel pretty powerful when you have to go loud. Now, that being said, there are going to be situations with extreme ranges, and you are going to need a sniper or DMR. And for that, I'm thinking of something very small and as compact as you can get. Because you don't want to be carrying around a PSG-1 while you're crawling through vents and squishing between boxes to hide. You already have a big Benelli M4, which isn't too bulky and has a thin profile, but you really don't want to push it here. So I figured instead we'd go with a bullpupped MDR rifle chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. 6.5 Creedmoor is an excellent accurate round. Many people would argue it's almost like a modernized version of the 308. So this bullpup package with a decent optic on it would be perfect for those outdoor scenarios, and more specifically for the situation where you need to cover Emma. Keep in mind, Emma is going to be pretty far away from you, so you need something that can take up or reach out past 300 meters, and this bullpup package would probably be your best bet. Now, the MTR isn't a combat rifle, it's a little bit sensitive. I don't think it'll choke up on water, however, if you're bumping this thing around, if you're falling over, if the enemy hits you really hard and he hits your gun, it's not the Benelli M4. It's not going to go through hell and high water and come out okay. But if you keep this thing as a backup and just use it specifically for sniping, it's gonna be a niche tool that will do that niche job very well. You might be thinking, Pliskin, this is going to be a scenario where I want to stay sneaky. You've given me the tools I'll need to survive a encounter or two if I get locked in at close range or in those far range environments, but what am I going to do if I want to get a quiet kill, if getting rid of an enemy silently is my only chance of survival? And for that, I'd say a knife. I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again. It's the only way to reliably kill your enemy with the assurance that guys close by aren't going to hear it. If you know what you're doing with a knife, you can take these guys out fairly silently with minimal struggle, and while it will be messy and there's probably going to be blood left over, in terms of the sound you're producing, you'll be able to go by undetected. Couple this with some smoke and stun grenades. Now, while you might have a Benelli M4 and a FN57 that'll penetrate armor, and something that reaches out beyond crazy ranges, you don't want to get caught in a firefight. I'm of the belief that you should be prepared for it, but if you can, you should want to avoid it. Obviously, the best choice is just sneaking around and avoiding enemies, but what if you can't? For those situations, I recommend you bring some smoke and stun grenades. Smoke grenades are going to be great for blocking out your enemy's visibility, for having them choke and be distracted so they're not looking for you. So if you're in Strut F and there's a bunch of guys coming around the corner to where you are, you can pop some smoke, and through the confusion, maybe you kill a couple of them, maybe you just sneak by, it's up to you. But having these smoke grenades, again, limit visibility and disable the enemies that are directly affected by it. Then the stun grenades are going to be for more combat scenarios. If you have 4 guys getting ready to breach a room that you're hiding in, yeah, Benelli M4 is going to be something that's going to be really helpful, but you still don't want to give them the chance to shoot at you. So if you toss out that stun grenade while they're out there, you can temporarily blind them and deafen them, giving you the time to either get the combat edge or run away. So your knife and those 2 different grenade types are really going to be your means of taking out enemies, disabling enemies, or sneaking away. So, in conclusion, the weapons that Raiden should bring with him are going to be the FN57 pistol as a versatile and reliable combat tool that'll penetrate body armor, the Benelli M4 with a variety of ammo types for sheer combat as well as those hostage situations where you need to be more accurate, the bullpupped MDR and 6.5 Creedmoor for sniping sections, your knife for close range stealth and killing enemies while being undetected, smoke grenades to limit visibility and stun enemies that are caught up in that smoke, stun grenades for quick getaways, and yeah, that is the loadout I think would give Raiden the best chance of surviving the big shell, since pistols don't act this way, and having all the weapons like PSG-1s and M4s and all this stuff packed on your body would limit your versatility and mobility. So with combat ability, versatility and mobility, as well as some stealth options in mind, this is what I think Raiden should bring with him. But what do you think? Do you know of a pistol and or PTW that really is that quiet? If you do, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time. This has been Pliskin. Over and out.
This is Solid Snake. Hey, subscribe to Pliskin Boy. God damn it.
You heard him.